we're obviously not going to get to every star in this galaxy, but there are a few other things that I think probably we ought to look at particularly. I wonder, Reed, if you'd take just a minute. I know there's no microphone down there for you to speak informally. Would you come up here? This is Reed Benson, ladies and gentlemen. I wonder if you'd comment. I wonder if you'd comment briefly. You're down in Washington. What's going on in the Congress, particularly with regard to the Nixon administration right now? Can you do that?
Well, let me simply say that one of the tragedies of the current administration, so far as the Republican Party is concerned, is that some of the members of the party are voting for legislation, socialistic legislation, they would have never voted for under Kennedy and under Johnson, but because the head of their party advocates it, they're supporting it. It's a real tragedy that men could be so devoted to party above principle. In fact, one of the jibes they sometimes laugh about in Washington on certain votes is where a congressman said, well, on that one I had to rise above principle. Of course, we know what they meant by that. Harry Dent, a little while ago, was interviewed by the New York Times. As some of you probably know, he was on the staff of Senator Thurman. He's now on the White House staff. He laid out the policy of the Nixon administration, their appeal to the left, and Harry Dent laid it out quite straight. I was amazed what he had to say. He pointed out all the things that the Nixon administration had been able to do in support of leftist or liberal, or we might more accurately phrase it, socialist policies that they were able to accomplish in just a few months under the Nixon administration that they were never able to accomplish in the 8 years under Johnson and under Kennedy. I think that's a real tragedy. Now, of course, our responsibility is to try and bring to the attention of the legislators the feelings of the fine grassroots Americans who've used a lot of shoe leather to get signatures on petitions, etc. This Tuesday afternoon, 2:45, I'll be in the White House to deliver some 200,000 signatures on petitions to try and encourage the President to reverse this tragic course that he's pursuing. I think of the illustration the Lord himself gave in the New Testament of the widow and the judge. Some of you recall. It was an unrighteous judge, but the widow felt she had a just complaint, and she kept coming up to the judge and being turned down, and she pursued it. And finally the judge, simply because of the persistence of this woman and her determination and not wanting to be bothered with her anymore, granted her request, even though the Lord himself says he was an unjust judge. Well, we're sending up our petitions, like the Constitution said, in a legal and moral manner, a means of going to our representatives about how we feel. We hope this tragic course can be reversed. There are some men in Congress who decide to some extent like weather vanes. They point in whichever direction the biggest puff of wind happens to come from. Some might perhaps weigh their mail. There are others that are dedicated, either to the right or to the left, so-called. I think you had a good example in the abortion case here of what Congressman Schmitz did in standing up to this issue about abortion on at military hospitals. I think finally he and others, I know it was one of the items of the projects of the John Birch Society, to write the Congress, to write the President, let them know how they feel about it, and finally that tragic policy was reversed. I think you'll see it in other areas as more Americans get knowledgeable about these facts and then bring their righteous, peaceful pressure on their representatives in Washington. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Reed. Of course,